I'm Dr. Marty Ross, and this is another Conversations with Marty Ross MD tonight. It's a webinar where we talk about Lyme disease. We talk about Lyme disease based on the questions that you provide. So every one of these webinars is a little bit different. Sometimes we get in themes of questions, sometimes we don't. But feel free to ask your questions. And the way that you do that is over here, right on the bottom, on the right-hand side of the screen there, is a chat box where you can write questions to me. I will try to get through as many of those as I can tonight. The thing I ask when you're writing your questions is hit the enter key one time. Every time that you hit that enter key, it actually creates a separate question when it comes to me, and it makes it difficult to put things together sometimes. I am creating a recording of tonight's webinar, and I will try to get that out to you tomorrow morning, somewhere around probably 6:30 to 7 o'clock Seattle time. That's Pacific Standard Time out here in Seattle, Washington. See, with that email tomorrow morning too, there'll be a sign-up form for or link to sign up for next week's webinar. So I will be doing one tonight and one next week, and then I'll take a week or two off. So I will take a little bit of a break there. So feel free to join me next week. And then during the webinar tonight, you'll see that I will post, for those of you that are participating in the live webinar, I will post your question on the screen so that you can see it. I do read those questions, and the reason I read them out loud is I want to make sure that those people that are listening in the recorded version can hear what the question is, because those don't show up in the recorded version. They did for a while, but under the more recent platform update that I have for the webinars, they don't record now with that. So yeah, I think that kind of gives us the business side of things here. So during the webinar tonight, I will be doing some screen shares with you. So those, I'll be showing you information that you can look at later on your own. And many of those will be screen shares that I'll show you of Treat Lyme, the website Treat Lyme, where you signed up for the webinar tonight. And there's a lot of helpful articles that many of you know I've written about Lyme disease. And then just a quick note about that. Over the course of the last couple of weeks, I've been rewriting and adding to and updating most of the treatment plans that I have to use antibiotics, herbal or prescription, or antivirals, or anti-parasites, or anti-yeast medicines. Any of my germ killer articles, if you would look online, you'll see that there's new versions of most of those. And if there is not a new version, there probably will be one soon. I'm getting ready to publish those all together as one resource that you'll be able to download as a treatment book, if you will, or a compendium of the guides that I have provided about what things you use to kill what to get over this illness. Okay, all right. So keep your eyes out for that. I'll be sending out an email once I have that whole thing put together. But I've been doing that, and with that, I also have been providing references. I've gotten into the science that I've used before, but I'm actually showing you the science that I've used to come up with some of the ideas that I come up with too. Okay, all right. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started here. Let's see here. There we go. Hello, Nancy. Hello, kind doctor. Thank you, Nancy. Let's see. Is it true that people who've had Lyme and maybe co-infection should never kiss anyone or share silverware because of transmission through saliva? Should I be afraid to kiss my spouse? There are all sorts of articles on the internet these days. Hard to sort out fact from paranoia. Thank you. There's a lot of paranoia out there. And what I would say is I don't think that it is transmitted through saliva. It's not transmitted by holding hands. It's not transmitted by kissing. It's not transmitted by sharing a toothbrush. It's not transmitted by sharing food. It's not transmitted by sharing a fork. Okay, I think a lot of that is hype. The ways that it can be transmitted is through a tick bite. Okay, we know about that. We know that there are some other vectors that carry it too, and those would be things like mosquitoes, flies, mites, and fleas, I believe. Those have been shown to carry these infections based on some European studies. Many of us wonder if they may also transmit, okay? And that's because when we look at the number of people that have Lyme disease, about 50% of the time that people have Lyme, they remember a tick bite, 50% of the time they don't, okay? So we think there may be some other vectors, okay? So one way it's spread is through a vector, all right? Something biting you and giving it to you, okay? Another way that we know that it's spread is during pregnancy. We know based on some pregnancy data that was kept out in the East Coast of the United States in the late 80s, early 90s, that a woman that had Lyme had a chance of transmitting it to their baby about 50% of the time, unless they were on antibiotics during the during the pregnancy. Okay, so that's another way that we have some evidence that it's transmitted. A third way that it could be transmitted, but the evidence is weak, it's not good evidence, is possibly sexually. And that would be through the exchange of vaginal and male ejaculate fluids, okay? Not holding hands or kissing, all right? And the reason we think it could be that way is if we look at studies about whether it's in the fluid, it is in the fluids. It's in women that have it, it's in their vaginal fluid. Men that have it, it is in their ejaculate. There have been 2 studies that were done looking at that. One of those studies showed that it was 100% of the time in the male ejaculate and 50% of the time in the vaginal fluid. The next study done that would look at the same question showed flipped results where it was 50% of the time in the male ejaculate in men that had it and 100% of the time in the vaginal fluid of females that had it. Okay, so we know it's in the fluids. However, there has never been a decent study showing that it's been transmitted. Now, notice the word I said, decent. If you start Googling about whether Lyme is sexually transmitted, you'll run into just a horrible study that was published a couple years ago by Stricker and I believe McCloskey, if I'm right. And the reason I say it's a horrible study, it only was based on 13 people. Who knows what we can glean from a study of 13 people. And in the study, what they did is they looked to see, they were able to look at vaginal fluid and male ejaculate and culture or do a study to find out what was the specific strain of Lyme. And in the study, there were 6 people that were in couples, so 3 couples. And in that, the female and male both had identical strains of Lyme. So they took that as proof that it had to be sexually transmitted. The problem is they didn't tell us when the last time is that the male ejaculated into the female. So when they're measuring what's in the female, is it because the male just left it in her over the last few days and it's really something he'd left there that her vaginal fluid just hasn't gotten rid of yet, okay? Or is it something that came from in her blood that got into her vaginal fluid? We don't know. They didn't control for it. In my own practice, I think I see that maybe about 15% of the time that somebody has Lyme, their partner has symptoms suggesting Lyme. And if I do a test, I find that that partner also has Lyme, all right? Now, does that mean it's sexually transmitted? It's hard to say. Maybe they got independent tick bites at some time, okay? So I think that the question about sexual transmission, I think it's very possible. I just don't know that we know for sure, okay? All right, so the way it can be transmitted is a bug bite, during pregnancy, maybe sexually, but I think the odds of it are quite small. I think probably 10 to 15% or less. All right? All right. I hope that answers your question. And good luck to you, Nancy. All right. Hello, Kristen. Let me get your question posted here. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. Last week you mentioned that the results from Armin Lab's ELISpot test are difficult to interpret as to whether increased cytokine levels or the level of how positive the test is means indicates how much Lyme is or is not in you. Okay, the white blood cells may be reacting so strongly they have it under control, or it might mean that the immune system is working hard because the germs are out of control. Given that, is the only way to determine whether or not any protocols are actually working is based on symptoms alone? Yes, I'll answer that. There is not a test that we can do in Lyme disease that says where we are. There is no test that we can do that says whether you really have knocked down your germ load or not. And that is because the tests all look at your immune system's reaction, okay? Whether it's an ELISpot, which measures an immune system reaction, or it's a Western blot, which measures an immune system reaction. All that those tests measure is, does your immune system react? And the degree of reaction is not directly correlated, does not exactly mean the level of germ load that you have in you, okay? So yes, the only way we really can know where we are in the Lyme disease treatment is based on what our symptoms show us, okay? Now, I will say one thing, there's another test out there that some doctors use. Dr. Stricker, who is the author of that bad study, Stricker does some good work, but he comes out with some really bad stuff sometimes too. But Stricker came up with a test called a CD57 that I know he still uses quite often. I just don't find it that useful. And what a CD57 is a type of white blood cell that can be low when somebody has Lyme. And Stricker has done some studies that show it can be low. The trouble is some doctors, including Stricker, tend to use it as a way of following where a person is in their Lyme treatment. And there have been some subsequent studies that have been done that looked at that and find that your CD57 level will probably stay pretty flat. It may go up or down 30%. It'll kind of just wave up and down about 30% until the end of treatment. And at the end of treatment, if it will go up, it will shoot up all of a sudden. Okay, so it kind of stays flat, going up and down about 30%. And then at the end of the treatment, it's going to shoot up right away. If it does, it doesn't always shoot up. Okay, so it does not steadily rise as the treatment's going on, but it just kind of goes along and then goes up at the end. So even that does not give us a good guide. So if you look online, you'll run into information by Stricker saying that it rises, kind of coincides with how good somebody's doing in treatment. That's not so. It's not really that useful of a test. I don't do it anymore, actually. So there's an article I have called CD57, and I call it CD57 ? And then I say no. I just have not found it to be a useful test. Okay, all right. So let's see what the second part of your question is. Let's see. Is there a specific order one should treat infections? I have mild mold, mercury toxin, and mild yeast, in addition to Lyme and co-infections. Okay, so generally, the way that I go about doing things, I like in my treatments to usually one of the first infections I'm going to treat is yeast. And the reason I'm going to go after yeast right away is yeast, if you have too many yeast in your intestines, they, at the beginning, they're going to continue to be a problem, especially as you start putting antibiotics in to get rid of your other germs, okay? And that is because when you're on antibiotics, they're going to lead to a greater chance of getting too many yeast in your intestines, okay? So I usually will treat yeast right away, especially before I put somebody on antibiotics, because I'm worried that if I put them on antibiotics, I'm going to make their yeast problem worse. The other reason that I treat right away for yeast, if it's there, is that yeast in your intestines triggers too many cytokines to be made, okay? So if you read my information at Treat Lyme, or if you participated in these webinars long enough to know, you know that I describe Lyme disease as being a syndrome of too many cytokines. So cytokines are chemicals made by your white blood cells when they see an infection. On the good side, they help turn your white blood cells on, but in Lyme, the immune system has a hard time, so it eventually makes too many cytokines. It keeps trying harder and harder to turn on those white blood cells, eventually makes too many cytokines, and too many cytokines give you all your Lyme symptoms, okay? So too many cytokines from Lyme or too many cytokines from yeast make it so you can't think, make you hurt all over, give you fatigue, can disturb your sweating mechanisms, etc. Most of the symptoms that we call Lyme disease symptoms are really symptoms of too many cytokines, okay? So I'd like to get yeast down as a means of lowering those cytokines. The reason I want to lower those cytokines is helps your immune system work better, okay? Because too many cytokines suppress the immune system, right? And also lowering cytokines will help you feel better, okay? So at the beginning, I'm going to treat yeast. Now, if I've got somebody that has a mild case of yeast, I might also start treating their Lyme infection at the same time, okay? All right. And then at a second treatment, after spending a month getting rid of yeast, after we've got that cleared, I'm going to treat at that second visit. If I have not started treating Lyme, I definitely will. But if they're already on Lyme and somebody's got the co-infections of Bartonella or Babesia, I usually will treat Bartonella next. And the reason I go for Bartonella before Babesia is you start putting somebody on all these antibiotics to treat all of those, it gets to be just too many things. You start having side effects, okay? But the second thing is based on the observation of Burrascano, who's one of the Lyme pioneers out of New York State. He doesn't treat anymore, but he taught many of us a lot of good things about how do you manage Lyme disease. And what he observed in his practice is that if he treated Babesia before getting Bartonella out, it became harder to treat Bartonella, okay? So I usually will go with Lyme and Bartonella at the same time, spend 4 to 6 months getting rid of Bartonella, then turn over to treating Lyme and Babesia, okay? All right. Now, regarding your mold toxicity, that all depends on how significant that mold toxicity is in the cause of your illness, okay? So if I've got somebody that has Lyme, but I take a history about them and they were doing great until they moved into the house that had obvious black mold on the walls, I'm going to spend my first visits probably getting mold toxins out first. Because I have found that if somebody's got mold toxicity illness and it's clear that's what they got, I mean, they were doing great until they got their mold exposures, okay? That kind of clearness, all right? I have found that if you get mold toxins out first, often you don't need to treat the Lyme. All right. Because again, mold toxins also trigger cytokine excess. And just having Lyme infection in you does not mean you have Lyme disease. Oh, what does that mean? Well, Lyme disease is the mess that happens when your immune system isn't controlling your Lyme. All right. We can cohabitate with Lyme. All right. So everyone that has Lyme infection in them does not necessarily have Lyme disease. You can have healthy people that have a Lyme germ living in them or Lyme infection, but they don't have Lyme disease because they're healthy. Their immune system is doing what it's supposed to do, is controlling the infection. Okay. All right. So I have found, so earlier this year, I had a gentleman that came to see me that had been referred by another Lyme doctor in town to go out and see GemSec in Washington, D.C. to immediately get on IV antibiotics because he was so neurologically bad with his thinking that he right away needed to get on IV antibiotics. And I brought him in, I started talking to him, and I thought, yeah, you probably got Lyme, but boy, that story about living in a house where you got sick with black mold on the wall, that was pretty compelling to me. And so I just put him on mold binders. That's all I did. I put him on mold binders, and I put him on anti-cytokine therapy with curcumin and glutathione. Many of you know I recommend both of those as ways of lowering cytokines. And guess what? 3 months, his brain was back. He went from 4 years, I think 3 or 4 years of unemployment to being employed. His body pain was gone. His fatigue was all gone. He was back functioning. He still has positive Lyme test, but we don't need to treat it because he's healthy. We don't have to use anything to get his Lyme germs under control because his immune system is already doing it, okay? So in terms of your question, if I've got somebody that has an obvious mold exposure that was the cause of their decline, it's clear from the story it was the cause of their decline, I'll start with mold first, probably yeast first too, okay? But if I've got somebody that mold maybe is just part of the picture, what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend my first visit getting yeast, maybe starting to treat Lyme. Next visit, add in Bartonella to that Lyme treatment. Maybe go about 4 to 6 months, see where I am. We don't always have to spend time getting mold toxins out either, okay? So I'll wait sometimes 4 to 6 months and see, is it really something we need to address or not, okay? All right. So I know that's a lot to think about, but I hope that gives you some useful information there too. I'm going to do a quick screen share here because I want to show people some articles where you can see some of the information I just talked about, okay? All right, so this is Treat Lyme. If you take a look at my treatment protocol, the Ross Lyme support protocol, these are my Lyme disease treatment guidelines. You'll find that I describe here the essential steps you should do to get over Lyme, all right? So it's not just about poisoning your germs. You've got to do things to help your body work better, your immune system work better, okay? All right, so if you start looking here, I've broken it into steps. Step 1, get sleep. I give recommendations on that. Step 2, oh, actually, I meant to show you one thing. Up here in the introduction section. The one thing that I say here is that before you start, first thing, before you even start treating your Lyme, make sure it's not mold toxin illness, okay? And that's what I was just telling you. If you've got a clear story that it really was mold that set you in a bad place, go after your mold, okay? All right. Then the other parts, get sleep. Number 2, be on a paleo type diet. I find that's probably the best thing to do in Lyme. At least try it to see if it helps you, okay? Number 3, lower cytokines. I just mentioned that earlier, but one of the key things I like to do to lower cytokines is this curcumin, okay? Number 4, be on ashwagandha as an adaptogen. It's something that helps your body deal with stress. It also helps your immune system work better too, okay? Number 5, correct your hormone problems. Number 6, be on a good multivitamin. Number 7, do some basic detox work, including using glutathione, especially at the beginning of your treatment, okay? Number 8, exercise if you can. You may have to wait until you get into your treatment ways. Number 9, you don't necessarily need to do any immune boosters because this whole protocol is designed to boost your immune system, okay? And that's what I say here. Number 10, get yeast out. Now notice I even put that before starting your Lyme infection and co-infection, okay? But as I just said to you, you could treat yeast and begin your Lyme infection treatment at the same time. And then you can add in the co-infection treatment at the next visit, all right? So those are some key parts to my treatment protocol. You might want to take a look at that there, okay? Then, in terms of Herxheimer reaction and lowering cytokines, there's a couple articles you could take a look at. So in my chapter called Herxheimer Reactions, there is an article called Herxheimer Die-Off Reaction Inflammation Run Amok. And this is where I describe what a Herxheimer is, which is really too many cytokines, okay? And I describe what you could do to deal with those. Or this other article called Control Cytokines, which even looks at the cytokine question in a bigger way. It tells you what the problem is and the steps you can take to lower it, okay? All right. And then I'll just point this one out to you. I posted a new article a couple weeks ago called, Is it a Herx? How do you know if it's a Lyme Herx, okay? So keep in mind, every time you feel bad in Lyme, it is not a Herxheimer reaction, all right? A Herxheimer reaction occurs after you've started having more killing. That usually occurs when you add a new antibiotic in or increase an antibiotic dose or do something that turns your immune system on to fight Lyme better, okay? All right, but I go through that more detail in that article too. Okay, all right, let me go back here. All right, very good. Thanks for the question, Chris. Good luck to you. Hello, Patricia. Let's see. Are you familiar with Dr. Holtorf's peptide for thymus for immune modulation 1, thymosin alpha 1 and 2, thymosin beta 4? So how does one procure these peptides and at what dose? So there is a manufacturer of these. I'm blanking on the name of the manufacturer. My understanding is these are all given IV, actually. So you'd have to work with a doctor to be able to give those. I believe they're all IV administered, actually. And I am blanking on the name of the company that actually manufactures those. Okay? All right. Good luck to you. Hello, Jonathan. Let's see. Does research nutritional transfer factor multi-immune cause cytokine flares? Aha! This is similar to the question I was just raising. So remember I said a Herxheimer occurs whenever you start doing more germ killing, either from being on antibiotics, either from just changing to a new antibiotic where you get a greater kill, or raising the antibiotic dose, or doing something that stimulates your immune system to attack germs better, okay? So transfer factor multi-immune can turn on a type of white blood cell called a natural killer cell to more effectively treat infections, okay? And so it's possible sometimes when you start transfer factor multi-immune or any of the other transfer factors that Research Nutritionals makes, that you could turn the immune system on in a way that kills germs better. So you may have a Herxheimer reaction from that, okay? So yes, it's possible, okay? So transfer factor multi-immune, everyone, by Research Nutritionals turns on what are called natural killer cells. Transfer factor plasmic, what transfer factors are, everyone, are a group of proteins made by white blood cells that target white blood cells to fight certain infections, okay? Transfer factor multi-immune is a little different than some of their other products in that it targets actually a specific type of cell called a natural killer cell that actually fights any kind of infection. But it's turning on that one kind, okay? Versus other transfer factors in the Research Nutritionals transfer factor line are designed to target certain infections, all right? So for instance, transfer factor L plus has in it transfer factors that will target the immune system to fight and attack Lyme, Bartonella, Babesia, Ehrlichia anaplasma, Epstein-Barr virus, cytomegalovirus, human herpes virus type 6, and I believe chlamydia pneumoniae. Okay, I believe chlamydia pneumoniae is part of that too. All right, their virus mix, their transfer factor mix that has in it transfer factors against viruses is called transfer factor plasmic, and their transfer factor mix that has transfer factors in it that target mold toxins is the transfer factor Enviro. Okay, all right, and on any of those, the way you take those is 1-2 times a day. Okay, all right. And I have a whole article on that. I'll just show it to you real quick. All right, so if you want to look at the article I've written on that, take a look in the immune system chapter or immune system section here. And let's see here. Here's the article on transfer factors called Transfer Factors Turn on the Army. Okay, right. I think I updated that sometime in the last couple weeks to a month ago. So it's full of fresh information. Okay. All right. All right, Jonathan. Good luck to you. Hello, Janice. Let's see. Lyme co-infections. I wonder if there was a first part to your question. I hope I can answer it. Let's see here. Lyme co-infections, EBV plus other viruses. I'm using. Oh, okay. It is a whole question. Let's see. I am using your Mariva 500 SF. Bone and muscle and nerve pain. Is there anything else to help deal with this pain? Also, since Lyme loves collagen, what is the best collagen product? I look forward to these webinars. Good, Janice. Thank you for saying that. So in terms of collagen, everyone, is the connective tissues, the type of tissue that holds things together in the body, okay? And it has poor blood flow, and so therefore Lyme is attracted to it. Lyme likes to live in our body in areas that don't have good blood flow because oxygen in blood kills Lyme, all right? So Lyme likes to live on nerve coverings, likes to get inside joints, likes to live on your muscle coverings and in tendons, and it likes to live in the connective tissue, the tissues that hold things together, which is full of collagen. All right. So one of the supplements you could take that supports collagen, although to be honest with you, I just haven't had good success with it. I haven't found a good way of supporting it. But if you want to try something, it would be to take something called hyaluronic acid. Okay. So hyaluronic acid. I actually haven't used it in a long time. I used to use it, but I just don't use it that much anymore. I don't know the name. I don't know the dosing off the top of my head. That's something you may need to look up online. But hyaluronic acid would be a way to support your collagen. Okay. All right. In terms of what to do for pain. So pain can be due to inflammation, of which case the Mariva 500 can help. Okay, that's lowering cytokines. If that is not effective enough, I sometimes will add into that a glutathione. And what I like to use and the reason I add glutathione is glutathione also, through a different mechanism, will help lower cytokines as well too. Glutathione also helps repair tissue damage. So it gets inside of cells and it's used to repair cell injury. Okay, so for instance, you could be having a lot of injury to your cells that's resulting in some of that pain, and glutathione can help with that too. Okay, all right. Now, another thing that can be helpful is if you've got one of the other things that leads to ongoing pain in Lyme is if Lyme is in your brain, and in everyone it is to some degree, it can activate a type of white blood cell in the brain called a microglia. And if those microglia get activated, they then send signals throughout the body that cause nerve pain, actually, too. Okay. And one of the things that's helpful to help with microglia pain, which also helps lower inflammation chemicals that lead to pain, too, is to be on low dose naltrexone. All right. So naltrexone is a narcotic blocker. It's manufactured for people that have drug overdoses, and we give it to them normally to help lower their narcotics, okay? Or to get their narcotics off of the narcotic binders and our binding sites in our body, right? We make our own set of narcotics. They're called endorphins. And the endorphins that we manufacture not only regulate pain, but they also are effective at regulating the immune system and decreasing inflammation in the immune system, okay? So what happens is if you use naltrexone at a low dose, that's why we use it as low dose naltrexone. It's actually manufactured as a 50 milligram pill, but when we use it as low dose naltrexone, we use it as a 1.5 milligram pill. And some medicine has to be made by a compounding pharmacy. It has to be mixed up for you, okay? And what happens is when we use it at a low dose, it provides a temporary blockade of our endorphin receptors, all right? Now, when you block an endorphin receptor for a short period of time, there's a few things that happen. Number one, the brain sends out a bunch of signals to the endorphin-making cells in the body and says, make more, all right? So they make more endorphins, all right? Second thing that happens is it makes it so that those endorphin receptors become a lot more sensitive to endorphins too, okay? So what happens then is when the endorphin blockade wears off, when that naltrexone goes away, those receptors get flooded with extra endorphins, and they react more strongly to those endorphins. Okay, and because endorphins control pain, you get immediate pain relief. All right. Secondly, though, the low dose naltrexone blocks another type of, and I'm blanking. There's a receptor on white blood cells, and I'm blanking on the name of the receptor on white blood cells that it blocks. And when it blocks toll receptors, they're called toll receptors. It blocks toll receptors on white blood cells, like the microglia in your brain. And that stops them from sending all of these signals that cause pain as well, too. Okay, so you get pain control because it blocks the toll receptors. You get pain control because the endorphins are made in increased amounts, and those endorphin receptors are more sensitive, okay? And then finally, a low-dose naltrexone decreases over time, slowly over time, decreases the amount of cytokines that you're producing as well, too, okay? So I will add low-dose naltrexone in if I've got somebody that was, say, we're a month or two into treatment and their pain just isn't getting any better, using glutathione and using the curcumin, the Mariva 500 curcumin to lower cytokines. At that point, I might add low-dose naltrexone. You start at 1.5 milligrams one time a day in the morning. Do that for 2 weeks. If you tolerate that, then you go up to 3 milligrams a day for 2 weeks. Then you go up to 4.5 milligrams a day. Okay? All right. So those are my general approaches. Let me show you where you can read more about this. Oh, the other thing that's useful for pain, don't forget to get sleep. Okay? Getting sleep makes a big difference for any kind of pain condition that you have. Okay? All right. So let me do a quick screen share here. Okay. So back at Treat Lyme. So there is a new article, actually. I did publish new. I think it's about 2 weeks old now, maybe. Take a look at my chapter on pain. And it's called Lyme Disease Pain Treatment, okay? And in this article, I do talk about the various steps that you can take, including got to be on sleep, work with the paleo type diet. I talk about the anti-cytokine herbs that you can use. Low-dose naltrexone I talk about here too. Yeah, that's a good point. The other thing you might want to consider is medical marijuana, and I describe that here too. There's one other thing I should have talked about, and that is if you have ongoing pain, and let's say you've had this ongoing pain for 6 months or more, the other thing you might want to look at doing is to start to work on fixing the energy factories in your cells called mitochondria. So our cell energy factories called mitochondria can get injured in Lyme disease too. And if they get injured, that leads to ongoing pain as well too. Okay. So what I would do in your situation is handle the acute inflammation with curcumin, 500 milligrams 3 times a day. You may even increase it to 1,000 milligrams 3 times a day. Be on glutathione. I like the Trifortify, the liposomal glutathione, and I would do 5 milliliters of that twice a day. Okay. If those two things are not helping well enough, start looking at low-dose naltrexone that I was just describing, and you might also want to add in some CBD or medical marijuana, okay? And then finally, if you're about 6 to 9 months into treatment and you still have chronic ongoing pain, then I would start looking at fixing the cell energy factories called mitochondria. Injured mitochondria lead to ongoing pain, okay? All right, that's kind of the approach. I lay it out in that article too, okay? All right. Good luck to you, Janice. Janice, also in that article, I do describe pharmaceutical options that you could take a look at as well, too. Okay. The options that I was just laying out for you are more how do you fix the problem that's leading to the pain versus the pharmaceutical options are really just going to cover the pain. Okay. All right. Good luck. Hello, Joseph. See, I've been taking Otoba and Cat's Climb up to 30 drops and I stopped. What is your recommendation? So I think you were saying is you stopped increasing. I'll interpret that's what you mean by stopped. I usually will use those as 30 drops twice a day. Okay. So if you've worked up to that, then I would stay on it for a while. Keep in mind, it takes time to improve in Lyme disease. All right. So if we look at studies about how quickly people get better, by 3 months of treatment, 30% have improvements. By 6 months, 60% have improvements. And by 9 months, 90% of people with treatment have improvements. Okay, so it takes time. The other thing, Joseph, I would point out, as I noted earlier from my treatment protocol, it isn't just about germ killing. Okay, so make sure you're doing those steps to get 7 to 9 hours of sleep. Get on some ashwagandha to help your immune system work better and your body to deal with stress. Okay, lower the cytokines with the curcumin. And if yeast is part of your picture, make sure you get yeast out. Okay, make sure you follow those steps in the whole protocol. You're going to have a hard time getting well if all you're doing is germ killing. Okay, all right. Good luck to you, Joseph. Thanks for that question. Hello, Giuseppe. Let's see. Hi, everyone. I have symptoms of stiffness and weakness in legs along with feeling fatigued. Some muscle twitching also. I have had numerous tests done from LabCorp and Quest, always showing negative for Lyme. I recently had a test for my Genix, and this is what it shows. Western blot IgM band 41 is indeterminate. IgG band 41 is positive. Band 58 positive, and band 8393 is positive. Bartonella is positive. My question is, do I really have Lyme with these results? Waiting to see my doctor, need advice. Thanks in advance. Okay, so when diagnosing Lyme, there's 4 things I look at. Okay, number 1, is there a risk that you could have gotten it? Okay, and again, 50% of the time that somebody has Lyme, they don't remember a tick bite, but I'm still going to look and see, is it possible that you could have gotten it from a tick? All right. And if you don't remember tick bite, I'm going to look and see, do you live in an area where there's lots of Lyme? So if you live in New Jersey where 95% of ticks carry Lyme, you have a high risk of getting it. All right. Okay. So I'm going to look at, what are your risk factors? Number 2, I'm going to look and see, do you have a lot of symptoms that say Lyme disease? All right. Number 3, I'm going to look and do a physical exam, which I don't get the benefit of doing here. And number 4, I'm going to look and see, do you have a positive test? Okay. Now, a positive test is only a predictive of Lyme if you have a number of symptoms of Lyme. Okay. There is a greater chance that the test you get that's positive is a false positive if you don't have many symptoms of the illness. That's for any illness. Okay. So whatever we're trying to diagnose, if we're trying to diagnose parasites and you've got a positive test, but you don't have any symptoms, there's a chance it could be a false positive test. Okay. That's just the way testing works. Okay. All right. So if I look just at your test, and again, you really need to look at the test based on what your symptoms and risk factors and physical exam. Okay. But if I just look at the test, you have a positive IgG test for Lyme. And that is because you have antibodies against 41 and 8393. Okay. Those 2 pluses, the plus at band 41, having positives at 41 and a positive at 8393. That means you've got antibodies from Lyme stuck on those 2 proteins. So what those numbers are, those are the weights of proteins that are found in the covering of the Lyme germ. And that pattern of having antibodies against protein 41 and protein 8393 is enough to say that you have Lyme disease. Okay, just based on the test. Now, granted, I would want to know all those other things. Okay. Also, the fact that you tested positive for Bartonella tells me you've been bit by a tick. All right. If you've got positive Lyme tests and you've got positive Bartonella tests, that says the greatest chance is that's a tick that gave you both of those. All right. All right. So do I think you have enough here to say Lyme? Yeah, I think you do, just based on the testing. Okay. I'd like to know more about your symptoms, but just based on that, I think there's enough there to say Lyme. Okay. Good luck to you, Giuseppe. One last thing too, Giuseppe. So in terms of the LabCorp and Quest Western blot that you had done, those would have used a test kit approved by the Food and Drug Administration here in the States. And that method of doing a Western blot will only find Lyme if you have about 60-65% of the time. The Western blot technique done through IGeneX will find it if you have it about 80-85% of the time. Okay, so it's a better technique. Okay, for a number of reasons, but it's just a better technique. All right. Good luck to you. Hello, Gail. Let's see, Dr. Ross. I have a few questions. Thank you. You're welcome. Let's see. You recommended Real-Time Labs mycotoxin panel. I cannot really afford it. What do you think about Great Plain Lab mycotoxin panel? it's only $250. I didn't even realize it was that much of a price difference. I think they do a good job. I think you could do that one as well too. Let's see. Do you recommend a glutathione challenge before collecting urine? No, I don't. I know that some people propose that, but basically, I don't think it's going to help you at all. I know people propose it, but it makes no sense to me actually. So I don't think you need to do that. My Lyme naturopathic doctor does a 2-gram IV push, then you collect after. Do you anything about Quest Bartonella testing through Nichols Lab? Thank you again. I don't know anything specifically about Bartonella testing through the Nichols Lab. The problem with Bartonella, and you probably know this, is that when you do Bartonella testing, most labs like Quest, so what I do know of Quest is you can get 2 strains through them. You can do a antibody testing through Quest for a Bartonella henselae. You can also do antibody testing for something called Bartonella cantana. Okay, the problem is there's probably about another 28 strains out there. Many of those are animal strains. Of the whole 30 strains that are out there of Bartonella, depending on whose estimate you look at, maybe there's about 14 to 17 strains that bother humans or infect humans, okay? And so the problem with Bartonella testing isn't so much the lab where you get it done, it's that wherever you're getting it done, they're not able to test for all the strains, all right? So often when it comes to Bartonella, you've got to make a decision to treat based on what your symptoms tell you. And so for a list of those Bartonella symptoms, I think you're probably aware of this, but I have an article on that. Let me go back here. All right, so I make my decisions to treat Bartonella based on what the symptoms tell me, okay? And so I'm going to take a look at this section called How to Diagnose. And for diagnosing Bartonella babesia, I go by symptoms. Take a look at this article called It Could Be Bartonella babesia, the Symptoms and Signs. Okay? All right. All right, Gail. Good luck to you. I didn't realize the price difference between the Great Plains and the real time. I know real time is quite expensive. Thanks for sharing that. Let's see here. Hello, Joseph. Let's see. I think you are great. I refer people to your site. What are the best links to buy products and join service? Okay. So Joseph, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Okay. So if you're looking for products, like what kind of things would I use? You can find that 2 ways on my site. Let me just show you here real quick. Actually, let me do a quick screen share. All right, so 2 ways. Number 1, my supplement store, which is Marty Ross MD supplements, you could get to by clicking this store link up here, okay? So these are the products that I have used with patients at my clinic. These are ones that I chose based on their quality, basically, okay? So anyone can get their supplements through Marty Ross MD supplements, all right? Okay. All right. The other thing, if people are having a hard time, that I do in every one of the articles now, right up here at the top, there is this banner where you can go and click on this. This is an advertisement for Marty Ross supplements too. Okay. All right. All right. So that's where to get supplies that I recommend. If it's not a supplement at this point, I don't have links to other kind of products. Over time, you're going to start to see, I'm in the process of updating this site. Many of you know I've been updating. It's obviously a new design, but over time, I'm going to have a resource page put together too, where you can find links to other products. Right now, the only thing I link to is supplements. Okay. All right. I hope that gives you some information there, Joseph. Good luck to you. Thank you. Hello, Kim. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. My daughter is currently taking Zithromax, rifampin, and I think that's what you mean by Zithromax, rifampin, and Mepron. I understand rifampin reduces the efficacy of Mepron. Doctor is prescribing a high dose of Mepron, 2 teaspoons twice a day to account for possible loss. Have you ever prescribed these two meds together? Um, Also, we seem to be playing a whack-a-mole with Bartonella and Babesia. Symptoms seem mostly Bartonella for weeks, suddenly by improvement. Then we see a sudden decline with mostly Babesia symptoms. Do you treat for both co-infections at the same time? Do antibiotics continue working on Bartonella even when the particular germ is quite? All right, good question. Okay, so the issue with rifampin increases liver metabolism of some medicines, including Mepron. Okay, so I often will use rifampin with Mepron without doing any adjustments. So you can even though that can happen in theory, often it's not a problem. Okay, but one way to overcome that problem would be to double dose. Probably take 10 milliliters in an adult. A regular dose in an adult would be 5 milliliters twice a day. I don't know how old your daughter is, so I'm going to just talk about adult doses. Okay, so adult dosing would be 5 milliliters twice a day. A double adult dose would be 10 milliliters twice a day, for instance. Okay, all right. In terms of do I treat for Babesia and Bartonella at the same time? Yeah, I will sometimes. When I do, though, keep in mind, Babesia takes about 5 months to get over, and Bartonella takes about 4 to 6 months to get over. There are times I have had problems where I will see I get one germ starting to get under control and the other one starts popping back up. I would need to ask you a number of more questions to give probably the best answer here, but sometimes it's just a matter of finding the right regimen that keeps them both under control at the same time. Okay. I'm just giving you a general comment, and maybe you all have done that already. That's what I mean. I would need to ask you a lot of questions to give you a specific recommendation. But I'll just tell you on the surface, this is a good regimen. If you wanted to make it even stronger, what you could do is add the sulfate antibiotic called Bactrim into this. Bactrim helps Babesia. Bactrim by itself can sometimes be a good Bartonella treatment. I like using it combined with rifampin, and in fact, I consider rifampin and Bactrim two of the strongest Bartonella agents that you can use. So sometimes what I'll do if I've got a person that keeps vacillating with their symptoms, I try to make each germ treatment a little stronger. And a simple way that you could do this if your daughter doesn't have allergies to sulfa antibiotics would be to add Bactrim into this mix, 1 pill twice a day. Again, if she's an adult, it's called Bactrim DS. If she's a kid, it's Bactrim, 1 pill twice a day. Okay? All right. And I think I answered your questions there. I hope that gives you some things to think about. All right. Good luck. Hello, Ellen. Have you had patients with POTS that did not have Lyme? Granddaughter diagnosed with POTS, but doc says no Lyme. In theory, yeah, people can get POTS and not have Lyme disease. The question I would have about the Lyme is, did they do the best test? Okay, so if they did a LabCorp or Quest test, they did not do the best test. If you want more information about that, take a look at the article I have on how do you test for Lyme, where I go through the problems with the LabCorp and Quest test, and I recommend IGeneX or Armin Labs testing. Let me just show that to you here. All right, so you take a look at the section called Tests right over here. And the article I've written about testing is called How to Diagnose Chronic Lyme. Well, no, that's the How to Diagnose. The test article is here. It's called A Review of Lyme Infection Tests, Pass or Fail. Okay? So I talk about the best way to test, but believe me, it's not using a LabCorp or Quest Diagnostics Lyme test. Okay? All right. Okay. All right, Eileen. Let's see here. Thanks. Good luck with your granddaughter. Hello, Susie. Let's see. I was bitten by a tick 11 months ago with a solid oval 2.5 centimeter rash, but don't remember getting sick at the time. Last few months have been generally unwell with fatigue and joint pain. Recent Lyme ELISA equivocal, Western blot, IgM band 23, 25 detected. and rickettsia detected. Since my rheumatoid factor is now elevated and ANA are elevated and CCCP antibodies are elevated, I've been diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis and advised to start on immunosuppressants. I'm worried about damage to joints if I don't take them, but also worried about the effect they may have if I have Lyme. How would you advise managing joint pain, preventing damage with these elevated autoantibodies if I may also have Lyme disease? Thanks for your advice. Okay, so in terms of your testing, so first of all, I one thing I'm going to suggest is that you try to get a more definitive test as to whether you actually have Lyme or not. Okay, so if they have not done a Lyme test using either the Stony Brook lab out in New York State or IGeneX for a Western blot, or the IGeneX immunoblot test, or if they did not do an Armin Labs ELISpot test for Lyme, those are the best labs to do your Lyme testing. Go back and retest for Lyme, all right? That having antibodies against band 2325 on your IgM is suggestive of Lyme, but I would not want to make a decision based on that antibody being positive alone. You would want to have a 2325 positive. In addition, you would need another band positive, and that other additional band could either be band 31, 34, 39, 41, or a band called 8393. Now, the problem with IGeneX and Quest on the IgM, they're only going to test for 3. They're going to test for 2325, 39, and 41. They're not going to test for the 31. They're not going to test for the 34, and they're not going to test for the 8393. You need to find a lab that will at least do that on the Western blot. Okay, and the lab that will do that is IGeneX or the State University lab at Stony Brook also will test for those as well too. Okay, the ELISpot test is another test that you can do that looks to see, do you have white blood cells that are reacting against Lyme? The best lab that does that is Armin Labs out of Germany. You could order up a test kit from them. IGeneX does an ELISpot too, but their internal validation studies about how effective that test is shows that it only finds Lyme about 30 or 40% of the time when it's there. I think they have a technique problem there, but Armin Labs seems to do a better job. We'll find out about 85% of the time. Okay, all right. Now, the reason I'm saying that I would try to find out for sure if you have Lyme or not is Lyme could be a cause of your rheumatoid arthritis. All right. In fact, the tests that you've had done, the rheumatoid factor and the ANA, those tests basically mean that your immune system is made antibodies that are attacking your genetic material in your cells. Okay. Now, we see that happen in rheumatoid arthritis, but also other things can cause that to happen too. So Lyme can cause that to happen, for instance, okay? The CCP antibodies being elevated, Lyme might even trigger that too. Rickettsia, I'm not sure if rickettsia is known to trigger rheumatoid arthritis. I'm just not clear about that. But the antibiotics you would use for treating rickettsia and treating Lyme, if you have Lyme, is doxycycline, which is anti-inflammatory and may even help treat other bacteria that have been shown in some limited studies to cause rheumatoid arthritis. Okay, so rheumatologists know, although they tend not to use it, there are studies that say that there are various germs like Lyme and other intracellular bacteria, germs that live inside of cells that might trigger rheumatoid arthritis. And there are some limited studies that say tetracyclines are helpful for this situation, okay? So what I think I would probably do in your situation is get a quality Lyme test, get started on doxycycline because you at least need to treat that rickettsia. And that doxycycline at 100 milligrams twice a day would likely help treat some of the inflammation related to whether your rheumatoid arthritis is caused by Lyme or something else, okay? So it gets you into that kind of a treatment. And see if you can learn if this is Lyme. If it is Lyme, I might still hold off on treating with the immune suppressing agents from your rheumatologist and work on getting Lyme under control for about 3 to 6 months, and then see if you're going to need to be on some of those immune suppression agents or not. Okay? All right. I hope that gives you enough information to work with there, Susie. Good luck to you. Hello, Eileen. Let's see. Thank you for all you do. Hope all is going well with the board. Thanks again. Thanks, Eileen. It's going. So, as many of you know, my board is very interested in what I do out here. So they requested a random chart audit. And so they have all the records they requested, including my 60-page response about what I do to manage Lyme disease. And we'll see what's going to happen with that. I have no idea how quickly they're going to respond or not. As many of you know, I was very disheartened by them because I had a face-to-face meeting with them back in October, November, and they were just really negative about treating Lyme disease and attacked me quite harshly back then. So we'll see where that's going to go. Thank you. I appreciate that. Let's see here. There we go. Hello, Susie. Let's see. Oh, I think we took that one earlier. I think you posted that one twice. I hope I gave you enough information then. Got a number of people that posted them twice. I'm just trying to get some of those cleared here. Hello, Amber. Let's see. Hi, I recently found out I have Lyme. We have no idea how long I've had it. It could be over 20 years. Should I do heavy metal detox before starting antibiotics, or can I start them at the same time? I have over 50 issues, including severe neurologic issues. So bad that my neurologist is saying I have early onset of dementia, not Lyme. Thankfully, I do not have to rely on him to treat my Lyme. So one thing I would want to know, okay, is how significant is the heavy metal elevations, all right? So what I have found, and I can just give you a general comment on this, I don't find benefit in Lyme disease by treating minor elevations in either your lead, mercury, or whatever heavy metals they find, okay? I know some of my natural medicine colleagues and some of my integrative medicine colleagues will always treat for any elevation of heavy metals because they think they need to get the immune system to work better. That has not been my experience. I find benefit in treating for heavy metals if there are really significant elevations. But if these are minor elevations, I probably would hold off on dealing with them and go after your Lyme first, okay? It is also possible if you do have major elevations, then I would probably start treating your Lyme and go after your heavy metals at the same time. But in terms of how aggressively you chelate your heavy metals, you may need to go slower. So for instance, one way to remove your heavy metals is with a chelation oral agent called DMSA. And we'll dose it based on what a person weighs. But for an average adult female, it's probably going to be 3, maybe 4, 500 milligram DMSA pills. And one way that you would take those is to take 2 of those twice a day for 3 days in a row and then be off of them for 11 days, okay? That's an aggressive way to chelate. Sometimes that just is too fatiguing to do when you have Lyme disease at the same time, okay? A less aggressive way that you can chelate in that kind of a situation is to actually take 1 of those 500 milligram pills every 3rd day, okay? So that compares with taking 2 pills twice a day or 4 a day, 3 days in a row versus 11 days off. That's a heavy treatment versus a light treatment would be 500 milligram pill every 3rd day, okay? So those are just some considerations for you to keep in mind. All right? All right. Good luck to you. Hello, Donnie. Let's see. I've been diagnosed with Lyme and ALS from different doctors. Have you seen this before? Have you seen anyone cured? So, Donnie, I'm sorry to hear that. So ALS, everyone, is Lou Gehrig's disease. It's basically a problem with what are called the dorsal ganglion, which are nerve fibers that come out of the spinal cord in the back. And it's caused by degeneration of those, okay? So ALS can sometimes be caused by Lyme. Not everyone with ALS has Lyme disease causing their ALS, but Lyme can be a cause of ALS, okay? And I'm not sure if you could find information about him online these days or not, but there was a medical doctor named Martz who had ALS and Lyme, all right? And how he was a cancer doctor actually in Colorado Springs, and how he decided to treat Lyme is that he had severe ALS. He became wheelchair bound. And evidently, as he was nearing the end of his days, the family decided to take him traveling abroad. And he discovered when he was on anti-malaria medicines that a lot of his ALS symptoms got better. And that started him investigating, and he came back and decided to do further testing for Lyme. And what he found is that as long as he was on IV ceftriaxone, he did well. In fact, he got out of his wheelchair eventually. And as long as he maintained his IV antibiotic for years, he was healthy, moving around, and not having problems. Okay. So his name is Martz. He treated people with Lyme and ALS for a long time. He eventually developed some heart issues. I don't know what has happened with him over time, but he's no longer practicing because of his heart condition, not because of the ALS. Okay. So he came up in his practice. He attracted a lot of people that had ALS and Lyme, and he used a regimen. This is probably about 8 or 9 years, maybe 10 years ago now. That it was called the Martz protocol, MARTZ, and then protocol. Okay, and what he was using for people is he was using low doses of IV antibiotics. He was doing low dose ceftriaxone with low dose Zithromax with low doses of Flagyl. That tended to be the major part of his protocol. And he did a study that never got published, but he did a study on a number of patients in his practice that had ALS, okay? And what he learned by using that protocol is that I believe he studied, it was about 13 people, if I'm correct. It was a very small study. And of those, he reported, I think it was 3 or 4 got better or stopped having decline with that kind of IV treatment regimen. And then the other people all continued to have decline, okay? Now, his regimen of going low dose IV antibiotics may not have been the best regimen, okay? But his regimen, his studies say that, yeah, treating for ALS in some can make a difference, all right? Now, in my practice, what I have seen is treating ALS and Lyme can be difficult. And I would say about 25% of people can be helped with antibiotic treatment to recover or to improve or to stop progress of the illness, okay? The other 75%, however, I have not seen good benefits over time. And often the illness just continues to progress the way that it would have, even if we had not treated the Lyme, okay? So you're in a difficult situation there, but I'm just reflecting my experience. If you want to read more about Martz, I bet you can still find information about him online. Just Google the Martz protocol, Dr. Martz in Colorado Springs, and I bet you can find some information about him. Okay? All right. Good luck to you, Donnie. I wish you well. Yeah. All right, let's see here. Hello, Jerry. Let's see. We consulted with you 2 years ago. Daughter was 23 and had Hashimoto's. Her thyroid, I think you're telling me, is normal at this point. Treated Babesia times 3 years now. Treated with Mepron Azithromax for 3 months, later for 7 months, but stopped due to severe side effects. You recommend she switch to Crypto 1 teaspoon 3 times a day and Sida Acuta 1/2 teaspoon 3 times a day, and she did times 2 years. Recently started seeing a local medical doctor who kept her on the Crypto and Sida, but lowered the dose eventually to 1/2 and 1/4 spoon of each twice a day, and added in Ennula 15 drops twice a day. She's doing phenomenally well. She will start weaning off slowly, currently studying abroad. Great. One thing that remains puzzling is her continued elevated TGF beta 1 level. Her baseline is always 22,000 to 28,000 despite Mariva curcumin 3 times 3 years. Eating gluten-free, on low dose naltrexone and ashwagandha. No symptoms, I think, of mold or other infections, etc. All other labs are good, even one for mold. In April, the level jumped to 40,000 after a severe upper respiratory tract infection. Current MD feels it's nothing to worry about and says since she's doing well, no symptoms of Babesia and feels better than ever, that we should stop testing the level. I worry we are missing something in what possibly long-term issues might be with such high level, lung scleroderma, cancer. Thanks for the insight. Okay. So TGF beta 1 is a cytokine, okay? And when it is elevated, it can indicate that there is still something that's causing ongoing inflammation. It being elevated doesn't tell us what's elevating it, though, okay? It could be any number of things. Usually it's infection related. It is possible. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with Dr. Richie Shoemaker. You probably are, because he does a lot of the TGF beta 1 testing. Shoemaker has coined a term called chronic inflammatory response syndrome. He developed that term related to mold toxicity illness. But essentially what it means is that once you get into inflammation from mold or possibly inflammation from Lyme, it sets up an ongoing inflammatory reaction that takes on a life of its own. It just keeps begetting itself again and again, okay? The treatment is get your germs under control, which you've done here. I think you've done a great job with that. It doesn't sound like we got mold or other infection possibilities that we know about. To be honest, I don't have any other added insights for you as to what to do to go look at this. You may want to take a look. Shoemaker, in his chronic inflammatory response syndrome, has various steps that you would do depending on which inflammatory chemical he has that are elevated, okay? So he, for instance, would have you test a number of inflammatory markers. One of those is something called a C3A, something called a C4A, something called TGF beta 1, something called VEGF, something called MSH. And what you can do is there's different treatments he recommends depending on which of those chemicals is elevated. And you have to get rid of the inflammation of one chemical before you move on to the next one, okay? I don't always remember the exact steps off the top of my head, but what I would do is take a look. If you're looking for other ideas on what might be going on, take a look at Richie Shoemaker's work. You can find it at survivingmold.com. Look to see what he recommends to do for a TGF beta 1 that's elevated. And if I'm correct, I think what he recommends for that one is a blood pressure medicine called Lopressor, I believe. I believe that's what he's recommending for that. You'll have to, again, I haven't done it in a while, but for each of these chemicals that's elevated, there's certain thing he recommends. And I think for this one, actually, it's not it's losartan, I think, is what he recommends for a TGF beta 1 elevation. Take a look at his protocol and see what kind of steps he recommends. Okay, that would be a thought. I'm glad to hear she's doing well. What I would also tell you is sometimes we just have these unexplained reasons why things stay elevated. It's also possible you can have false positive. Okay, I'll point that out. If she's doing really well and you keep seeing elevations of this chemical, maybe the test is wrong. Maybe there is something about her blood chemistries that is being incorrectly interpreted by the testing machine, the testing reagents, as showing an elevated TGF beta 1. It could be a false positive test. And for some reason, how she is set up genetically and biochemistry, et cetera, is leading to that as well, too. Okay. So the other thing, like your physician is saying, maybe you should just leave it alone. That's possible. But before you do, you might want to take a look at the recommendations about Shoemaker, about how he says, check this one level. If that's normal, then check the next level. If that's normal, then check the next level. And he tells you for each of those elevations, what's the next step to do. Okay. I'm just not remembering the whole protocol off the top of my head. All right. Good luck to you. Good luck to your daughter. Hello, Stephen. Let's see. What's the most effective way to kill ehrlichiosis? So just about a week ago, I put up a whole new article on how do you treat anaplasmosis and ehrlichiosis. So you can read it there, Stephen. But the two antibiotics that work best are either doxycycline or rifampin. All right. Doxy at 100 milligrams twice a day, or rifampin 300 milligrams, 2 pills 1 time a day. This is one of those germs. I just don't really find there's effective herbal ways to treat it. And usually, although thankfully with the Ehrlichia and Anaplasma, they're actually fairly easy to treat. 2 to 4 weeks of either one of those antibiotics should take care of it. Generally, because I know as part of my Lyme and Bartonella treatments, I'm going to use a tetracycline like a Doxy or rifampin. I usually don't even bother testing for those co-infections, as I know that somewhere in a person's treatment, I'm probably going to have them on a tetracycline for at least 2 weeks, and we've taken care of it. Okay. But if you want to see more, I've got a whole written article about that as well now too. Okay? All right. Good luck to you. Hello, CJ. Let's see. What type of test can be done to measure neurotransmitters? Would urine or blood testing be more accurate? What are some options to treat abnormalities? CJ, I use, so neurotransmitters are the chemicals that are made in your brain that allow the nerves to talk together. Okay, that's neurotransmitters. And there was probably about 10, maybe 15 years ago when I started working in this area, I was doing a lot of neurotransmitter testing back at that point. And at that time, depending on which neurotransmitter was abnormal, we would get recommendations about which supplement you were supposed to take to correct that. Okay. I have to be honest with you. It's an area that probably showed a lot of promise, but the reality is correcting most of those neurotransmitters doesn't make a difference. So I'm not a big believer in testing anymore. It's one of those things I tried clinically in my practice for a couple of years and just never saw beneficial results. Even getting those neurotransmitter levels into normal range, it didn't see beneficial results. I'm not a good source on that one, but I just generally am not a big believer in it either. Okay? All right. Good luck to you, CJ. Thank you. Hello, Deborah. Let's see. Hi, I just joined in. I was wondering, what is the average length of time for patients to be on antibiotics? All right. So Deborah, there's a whole article I have about how long does it take to treat various infections. It's actually, let me show you so you can go look at this later. Oops, sorry. Let me go back here. I got to do a screen share actually first. Let's see. Okay, so first, there's two places you can look here. Number one, take a look in my infection treatment plans. And the one on Lyme disease, I tell you it's an average of 2 years. And the one on Bartonella, I tell you the average length of time to get rid of Bartonella is 4 to 6 months. And the one on Babesia, I tell you the average length of time to treat Babesia is about 5 months. Okay, so that's one place you can find information. The other place you can look is this one called Recovery Time and Odds. And in that chapter, that section, so here you can find this article called Getting Healthy, Will I, When, How Do I review all the stats about how long it takes, okay? But on average, to recover from Lyme is about 2 years of herbal or prescription antibiotics. The average time period that you'll see before somebody starts turning the corner, there's been a study done, and I review it in this article too. That study shows that by 3 months of treatment, there's about 30% of people start getting better. By 6 months, 60% of people start getting better. And by 9 months, 90% of people start getting better, okay? So it takes on average 2 years to get well, but to start seeing improvements, it's going to take some time to get that as well too, okay? That's sort of the stats that I was just trying to tell you. If you want to read more about it, see that whole article, okay? All right. Good luck to you, Deborah. Hello, Nancy. As a follow-up, is oral sex and a real hazard for getting Lyme or co-infections from the partner's vaginal secretion or semen? I honestly don't know. I mean, no one has done studies to say for sure. What I would say again in my practice, when I see sexual partners, I see that about 10 to 15% have it. That could mean they're getting it from their partner. It could mean they're getting it independent of each other. Okay. So I'm sorry. That's the best I can say about that. All right. Good luck to you, Nancy. Hi, Kim. Let's see. Also, Dr. Ross, is zinc and rifampin an effective combination for Lyme, or does it only treat Bartonella? So I use zinc and rifampin to treat Lyme. So the zinc would treat spirochete Lyme. It also will treat Lyme that lives inside of cells called intracellular Lyme. And the rifampin is going to help with intracellular Lyme too, but also can treat the cyst form of the Lyme germ too. Okay, so it's a good combination for Lyme too. All right, Good luck to you, Kim. Hello, Tracy. Let's see. How do you tease out whether one is suffering from mold or Lyme? Do you treat them at the same time? Okay. So there's two ways I tease it out. Number one, if I get a solid history that a person was sick until they moved into a building that was full of mold, I'm going to treat for mold first. And I mentioned this earlier tonight at the beginning. It was one of the first questions I had. Often, all you need to do is get rid of the mold, and those symptoms that look like Lyme go away. Okay? All right? So if you missed that full response, listen to the recording tomorrow morning. I gave a very long explanation of that earlier. Okay, so I just gave you the brief version. But if you need more information about that, listen to the recorded version tomorrow. All right. And I answered, as part of that response earlier, I answered, do you treat them at the same time or not too? So take a look. I'm not going to go back over it again because a lot of people have been listening to the whole webinar tonight. But listen to the response. I think it was one of the first or second question I took tonight. Okay. Good luck to you, Tracy. Hello, CJ. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. Do you know of any labs or clinics that are selling umbilical cord stem cells to private practice LMDs? Do you recommend one over the other? So I am not aware of who is doing that. And at this point, I think the jury is still out about whether stem cell replacement stem cell therapy, regardless of where those stem cells come from, whether it's umbilical cord, whether it's coming from your platelets, whether it's coming from your fat cells. The jury is out at this point as to whether stem cell therapy is going to make a difference for most people with Lyme. All right. So the idea with stem cells is that the most rudimentary cell. They can be turned into anything in the body. They may help your immune system work better, and they may be able to repair damage created by Lyme to your tissues. Okay, that's the idea. LymeDisease.org, which used to be called the California Lyme Disease Association, has a program called My Lyme Data, where they are asking people questions about Lyme, and people allow information to be collected about them. And in the November ILADS meeting, International Lyme Associated Disease Society meeting out in Boston in November, yeah, it was Boston. I was somewhere for that meeting. They presented their findings, and one of the things that they presented was about people reporting that had done stem cells, what percentage said they had improvements, and it was only 10%. Okay. Now, what I don't know about their study is what kind of stem cells did they get, nor do I know how many treatments a person had. I don't have any information about that. Okay. But I got to tell you, at this point, I don't think any of us in the Lyme community really know. Are people going to have long-term benefit from stem cell therapy? And I know that's getting a lot of attention because Infusio is now set up in California to do it, and a number of doctors are trying it. But I think it's too early to tell for sure. I think it holds great promise. I'm just not sure it's going to work for everyone. Okay. All right. Good luck to you, CJ. Let's see. Hello, Deborah. Let's see. From what I'm learning from people's experience is about 2 years. Do you agree? And should a patient be on 24 months of straight antibiotics or mix it up with herbal treatment? How long on antibiotics and how long on herbal? Okay, so I think this is a continuation of the question you just said. So yeah, an average length of Lyme disease treatment is about 2 years. I do agree with that. And should the patient be on 24 months straight of antibiotics? You can mix it up. I mean, it depends. Sometimes it depends on what your preference is. It depends on what's working. Okay, so for instance, the herbal protocol of Otoba bark and Cemento, I find it works 85 to 90% of the time. Other ways herbally to go with would be like an Andrographis, Japanese knotweed, cat's claw, a Buhner type protocol that has been co-opted by Dr. Rawls into his Rawls protocol. But that's probably going to work about 60 to 65% of the time. All right. It all depends on which herbs you're using and who you are. And some people they're going to work, and in some people they're not. Just like the prescription antibiotics, any prescription antibiotic combination is going to work about 85% of the time to 90% of the time. But that all depends on the person. And if one isn't working, then you got to switch to another one. Okay. All right. So Yes, you can switch to herbs, you can switch to antibiotics, you can go back and forth, but it all depends on how they work in you. All right. Good luck to you. Hello, Tracy. Can you measure cytokines? Yes, a limited number. The thing is the ones we measure, maybe other ones are elevated that we can't measure. Okay, but yeah, it's possible to. Let's see. Hi, Tracy. Again, let's see. Can you still be positive for yeast if a stool sample shows negative? Yes. I have found that stool samples are notoriously wrong. um, and there's not a good stool test for yeast. As many of you know, I use a questionnaire to help determine if somebody has yeast at the beginning of treatment. But if you've been on antibiotics, or if you've ever been treated for yeast, then that yeast questionnaire doesn't work as well because it looks at a lot of historical factors. Okay, but there's a whole article I have about how to diagnose yeast, and I usually go more by symptoms and that screening questionnaire. Okay. There is an organic acid test that you can do that measure organic acids, and there is one that can be elevated in yeast called arabinose. And sometimes you can use that as an indication as to whether you have active yeast. I'm still not quite certain about the accuracy of that, but it is one way to look chemically to see do you have yeast or not. And I think it's probably going to be more accurate than doing stool studies. Okay. All right. Let me just show you a quick screen share here. All right, so in terms of yeast, take a look at my chapter on yeast. All right, and I would take a look at this article called A Silent Problem, Do You Have Yeast? Okay, and you can use that as a guide to figure out whether you might have yeast or not. Okay, all right. All right, thanks, Tracy, for that question. Hello, Sharon. Let's see. Hi, hello, Dr. Ross. I was just diagnosed with chlamydia pneumoniae in addition to my Lyme and co-infections. How should I treat it? Thanks for your advice. So I am of the school of thought that I'm not, there's two infections I know a number of my colleagues will go after that I'm skeptical about. And one of those is chlamydia pneumoniae. Another one is called mycoplasma pneumoniae. All right. So these are both bacteria that are known as intracellular infections. They live inside of cells. Okay. And the reason I'm skeptical about the significance of these infections is that they are common in healthy people. All right. If we were to do antibody testing for chlamydia pneumoniae and mycoplasma pneumoniae, we would find evidence that about 10 to 20% of people out there in the public that call themselves healthy, that have no problems, will test positive for those infections. All right. So when somebody comes back with it, it just may be background noise of a germ that's living in them. Now, I will admit, in Lyme, because of immune suppression, it's possible that an immune system that has been keeping these germs that cohabitate and live in us under control, then it's possible these germs get more active. My solution is get Lyme under control so your immune system is going to work, okay? All right. But there's another part to that. And that is when we treat Lyme, we should be using antibiotics that treat intracellular Lyme, Lyme that lives inside of your cells. And those same antibiotics that treat intracellular Lyme, guess what? They treat chlamydia pneumoniae, okay? All right. So intracellular antibiotics will treat chlamydia and will treat mycoplasma. So if your Lyme doctor is doing a good job managing your Lyme, has been treating for intracellular Lyme, you've already been treating for chlamydia and mycoplasma. All right. So that's my approach to it. Okay. As generally as get Lyme under control, and even so, probably what you're doing to get Lyme under control happens to kill these infections. And again, I'm skeptical that they really are a problem because most of us cohabitate with them anyhow, and they don't cause us real problems. Okay. All right. Good luck to you, Sharon. Thanks for that question. Hello, Mary Ellen. Hi, Dr. Ross. Thank you for these insightful webinars. You're welcome. What is your thought on the use of Pronstim NRF2 activator for the treatment of Lyme? You know, I have not been looking. I haven't used it yet enough to know. I can't give you a comment on that one. So I'm sorry about that. It's a newer product to me too, and I have not been instituting it yet in my treatments. It's one of those things that's on my list of things to look at. So thank you for that question, though. I'll have to get back to you on that one. Okay. Hello, Kelly. Let's see. Tired but wired. Terrible insomnia. Thoughts and suggestions are so appreciated. All right. So, Kelly, it's what Lyme can do. Okay. So the problem with Lyme, again, you get these excess cytokines, and they disturb your sleep centers. They can even wire you up and make it so you can't sleep. Okay. You're probably going to need to take a look. We're not going to have time to go into it right now because it's already about 6:28. I would take a look at the articles that I've written about how to get sleep, okay? Actually, let me show those to you real quick because you're going to need to get into the pharmaceutical and sleep hygiene recommendations that I suggest. All right, so take a look at my topic area called sleep. And I would take a look at the basic steps. This talks about sleep hygiene, the common things you need to do to help induce sleep, okay? You can take a look at the natural medicines one, but most likely what you're just describing, it means you're going to probably need prescription medicines, okay? And I talk about layering prescription medicines together based on what are called short-acting, they knock you out, and long-acting, they keep you out medicines, okay? So I would focus on this sleep and Lyme disease, the basic steps, and sleep, the prescription medicines, all right? And take a look at those recommendations. And I'm sorry, I just don't have more time right now. It's get a little bit late here for the webinar. All right, everyone. Thor, my Basenji, you probably have seen him hopping around back there, has been coming over, butting against the side of my leg here for the last 10 minutes. He needs to go out. Therefore, I need to go out, okay? So I've enjoyed being with you all here tonight. I'm going to be here with you again next week. Tomorrow morning, you'll get an email from me with information about how to sign up for next week's webinar. That email should come to you somewhere around 6:30 or 7 in the morning. You'll have information about how to access the recording of tonight's webinar too, okay? That webinar recording, if you happen to miss my email, you can find on Facebook tomorrow, Facebook /treatlyme, okay? You can also find it at my supplement store on the homepage. You can find it on the homepage of treatlyme.net, which is my Treat Lyme information site. And you can find it on the webinars page too. Okay, I'll post it in all those places. And finally, if you happen to follow me on my YouTube channel, you'll see the recording there. Okay, so it's going to be all over the place. You'll have it somewhere around 6:30 to 7 tomorrow morning. All right, I've had a good time being with you here tonight. I hope you all got some helpful information about steps that you can take to improve where you are. In a second here, I'm going to transfer you over to Treat Lyme. I'm going to land you on the page that's about why would you want to subscribe to Treat Lyme. I hope you'll take a look at that. There's lots of good information there, as you know. And keep in mind, when you support Treat Lyme by subscribing, you're supporting this kind of work as well, too. All right? So thanks, everyone, and good night, and have a good evening. Bye-bye.